Welcome back to the Sports Booth YouTube channel for the first part of our Rugby World Cup squad naming videos. So today we're going to look at 3 teams and the squads they have named for the Rugby World Cup as we get closer and closer to the World Cup. Squads are obviously being named, and today we're starting off with the original Tri-Nations trio, the Southern Hemisphere powerhouses, New Zealand, Australia and South Africa, or commonly known as the All Blacks, the Wallabies and the Springboks. But to kick us off, we're going to start with my home team, the All Blacks. Now, I made a bit of a prediction video, I think the Sunday, the day before the All Blacks were named, and other than one position or one player, I was spot on. So it was a pretty foregone conclusion team, I felt, coming out of the Rugby Championship. The players that had put their hands up had deserved their spots and rightfully got their spots. So running through it quickly. Props are Ethan de Groot, Fletcher Newell, Ofa Tungafasi, Tamatai Williams, Nepo Laulala and Tyrell Lomax. Very strong front row. The only player potentially unlucky to miss out, Joe Moody, but hasn't played since May. And in the end, I think this was the right 6 to select. The free hookers are the same as we've seen all year. Samasoni, Tokiaho, Cody Taylor and Dane Coles. The locks, Sam Whitelock, Brodie Retallick, Tupavai and Scott, the bad dog Barrett. Onto those loosies, and no Finau is about the only one that drops out from the Rugby Championship. So we see Artie Savia, Sam Cane, Dalton Papali'i, Shannon Frizzell and Luke Jacobson. And I think this is the perfect mix of loosies. With Luke Jacobson's ability to play all 3 spots, Shannon Frizzell has played a bit of lock with the Highlanders, so I just sat there, you've got Artie, who can pretty much play all spots, you've got Sam Cane, who's a specialist 7, and Dalton has moved around a bit as well, so I just feel like this works well, and it allowed them, the flexibility of the players and the natural abilities they have in each different loosey position meant that the All Blacks were able to select that extra outside back. The halfbacks, and this is the only spot I got the one position and player wrong. I went Aaron Smith and Cam Roigard, who have been selected. I thought after Finlay Christie just hadn't shown me enough, I thought they were going to go to Brad Weber. And the only reason I say this is come World Cup final time, say Aaron Smith was to have an injury, I just didn't have a lot of confidence in Finlay Christie to start. And I think Cam Roigard only playing one game, it's hard to say and question his ability in that position. So I thought they were going to go Brad Weber, but in the end they've stuck with Finlay Christie, and I can't doubt that they know that obviously better than we do, but yeah, that was the only one change I might make to this team. But again, Finlay Christie's been in the setup for this year, knows what is expected of him. First 5's easy, D-Mac, Richie Mo'unga and Beauden Barrett. Beauden Barrett more than likely going to be playing at fullback, but selected in that first 5's group. Not much to say about that. All 3 world class. All 3 could do a job. Richie Mo'unga has put his hands up in the Rugby Championship the most, but we'll see when push comes to shove. Midfield, Geordie Barrett, Anton Leonard-Brown, Rieko Ioane and David Havili. So Braden Ennor misses out. Also had the injury in the last game against the Wallabies. I'm not bothered by this at all. I thought David Havili, if he could get back into match fitness, he'd be in the squad. He is a weapon and could arguably be a better 12 than Geordie Barrett, so it doesn't surprise me that they've taken a bit of a gamble and bringing him across even with limited minutes. It'll be interesting how they manage Rieko Ioane in the outside centre. I imagine Anton Leonard-Brown's going to spend some time now in the 13 jersey over his preferred 12 jersey. Outside backs, normally you obviously see 4, but they've been able to 4, maybe 5, but with Beauden Barrett obviously filling the 15, they've been able to select 5 and probably 4 specialist wingers. Lester Whanganuku, Mark Talia, Moni Narawa, Caleb Clark and Will Jordan. And I just think this is the best bunch. Sean Stevenson, yes, of course, unlucky, but I imagine next man up if any of those go down. Game-breaking wingers can win you tournaments as much as obviously you win the game up front. Game-breaking wingers can definitely assist on that. So I imagine we will see all of those players throughout the tournament. All right, let's move on to the defending champions Springboks. A really interesting, squad selection. They come into like their second cycle, especially with this team. A lot of experience, a lot of World Cup winners from the 2019 World Cup. However, 3 big names miss out. I consider it 2, and I'll explain why, but no Andre Pollard in the squad. The fly half missed out. Lucano Arm also missing out due to injury. Both of them out injured. And Ludiaga as well missing out. But let's run through their front row to start off with. Their props look like this. Stephen Kitsoff, Vincent Koch, Franz Malherbe, Oxnish, and Trevor Incagnane. Just solid front row. They've done the business before. Probably the strongest position just about for the Springboks heading into this World Cup. Only 2 specialist hookers is really interesting. Malcolm Marx, obviously, and Bongi Mbonambe are 2 of the strongest. It'll be really interesting how they use them and the game time they give them and how they're managed, I guess, over the course of this World Cup. It is, as many people have pointed out, the longest World Cup, a lot longer between games than normal, so shouldn't be that big of an issue. And they've got utilities in Franco Mostert and Dean Foyer. Dean, who has also played hooker before, more of a number 7-6 specialist now, but has played hooker before if need be. So it'll be interesting to see the makeup of their squad and how they go with that. But 2 world-class hookers. Locks, as I said before, not so worried about Diaga's missing the squad because they've got players like Ebenezer Beff, RG Snyman, Marvin Audier, and Gene Klein. I've been really impressed, obviously, with the return of RG Snyman was massive in the World Cup last time out. That has missed most of this cycle due to injury, but came back, was really impressive for Munster, and I think fills in that void left by Diaga. Onto the loosies, a really strong loose forward, Pack, starting off with Peter Steph Toy, Wagga Smith, Marco van Staden, Johan Vermeulen, Jasper Wiese, and Saya Kolisi, obviously. Saya still recovering from injury, so one of the few they took, but obviously an inspirational leader. Other than that, world class across that pack. And it'll be interesting decisions they go with who lines up where if Kolisi gets himself back on the field and when. I guess it's more a when probably. You wouldn't be taking him in the squad if he wasn't going to play at all. So when he comes back, how the rest fit into the squad. Halfbacks, and this is a really interesting one for me. Taking 4 halfbacks seems like a real luxury. I understand 3 and why you'd take 3, but taking 4 just to me seems a bit crazy, especially when you've only taken 2 specialist hookers. Jaden Hendricks, Cobus Ryarch, Faf de Klerk, and Grant Williams. Just to me, I would have cut one of them. I'm a big fan of Jaden Hendricks, but he hasn't played a lot for the Springboks this year. Faf, obviously world class. Like, you can only play 2 in a game. You're never going to have 3 on the jersey numbers or the squad, game day squad. So just seems a bit strange to me there. And again, when they've gone 2 specialist fly halves with Manny Lebok and Damien Villemesse, look, again, Manny Lebok I think is the only specialist fly half. Villemesse is a great player, and I prefer him at fullback, but showed in New Zealand probably not the first 5 that's going to lead them to glory. And this is why I think Andre Pollard is such a big loss for the Springboks, because he was their specialist fly half and could play Springbok ball better than anyone. The Springboks have also only selected 3 specialist centres in Damien Delande, Jesse Creel, and Andre Esterhuizen. So no Lucano Arm, dealing with an injury, but obviously a massive loss. And then gone with 3 centres. So it would be really interesting to see, again, when push comes to shove, who they select in what positions and where. And finally, the outside backs for the Springboks, definitely the most dangerous position on the field for them. Cheslin Colby, superstar, what else can you say about him? Kanan Moody, Kurtley Ardenese, Makazole Mpimpi, and Willie LaRue. I mean, those 4 wingers are electric. Any of them on the wing is going to cause issues for the opposing team. And then I imagine Willie LaRue will marshal the back line come finals time if Springboks are to make it, which, based on all their World Cup performances, you'd think they'd get there. So yeah, it's an interesting team though. The big loss, obviously, Andre Pollard and Lucano Arm, to me, are massive losses. Especially Andre Pollard. I think you can't underrate how big of a loss he will be to not be there. Manny Lebok has shown that he's got potential, and this is his time to step up and prove it on the world stage. So it will be really exciting to see how he goes. And to finish off the Wallabies, wow, Eddie Jones playing mind games with the whole world at the moment, probably even himself. Very interesting squad, very interesting selections, very interesting development in the team. A very youthful side, a very inexperienced side. Will be really interesting how they handle the pressure over there and the environment of a Rugby World Cup, but no better man to lead them into it than Eddie Jones. So starting off with the props, which we once considered probably their strongest position, with the loss of Alan Aleatoa really hurts, and Taniela Tupou coming back from injury will be up in the air. But to start off with, we have Tupou, as I mentioned, Ponefa Masuli, the human wrecking ball Angus Bell, Zane Nagore, James Slipper, and the uncapped Blake Shoup. In the hookers, we have Dave Porake, Jordan Ulese, Matt Fassilia, who also just made his debut in the game against the All Blacks the past weekend. Locks, which was once, Wallabies' weak points for so long, now looks like a strength with newly capped captain Will Skelton, Richie Arnold, Nick Frost, and Matt Phillip. And the Lucies, the first big shock, no room for Michael Hooper, as they've gone with Tom Hooper, incumbent Michael Hooper, Fraser McWright, Rob Leota, Rob Valentini, and Lange Gleeson. Also no Pete Samu, which is really interesting. For how well he was playing last year, for him to miss out is just an interesting, prospect and interesting dimension of how Eddie Jones is working and building this team. Halfbacks, the experienced Nick White, along with Tate McDermott, who is vice-captaining the squad. And then the shock, I want to say shock, but we kind of mentioned it on the podcast last week, was who's going to be that third halfback. We know Ryan Lonergan's been the preferred one in the setup, but no one had really put their hand up. Jake Gordon had done it for a while. I chucked the idea of maybe a Kurbalo coming all the way back and representing Australia, but it's even more surprising, I would say. Isaac Fines Leaweda of the Western Force gets the selection. I love this. He was a massive spark off the bench in the Australian A game against Tonga when he came on. I think this is really good for him and his ability and the hard work he's put in, and what it brings if you either decide to start Tate or Nick White. If he's on the bench, he can bring that spark as Tate does. So it'll be really interesting how he uses him. But I imagine we will see him on the field at some point. The other massive point, one fly half, one first five, Carter Gordon. He is now the king, the golden boy of Australian rugby, leading them into this next, golden generation, ideally for the Wallabies fans. No Quade Cooper, who's missed out on selection. But very interesting to only select one first five in the squad. Ben Donaldson and Josh Kimini have been selected as the utilities, as Eddie Jones likes to talk about. So I imagine Ben Donaldson will see some time in the fly half jersey, but Carter Gordon, it rests on his shoulders. Midfield's pretty much selected themselves, with Hunter Paisami not quite returning from injury, and Liam Ekitau also been out for probably half of the tournament, so they just decided not to risk it. We've got Samu Karevi, Lalakai Fekete, Jordan Pataya, and Izzy Parisi make up a very strong centre group. And finally, the outsides, where the final shock comes in. We've got Mark Nawanganitawase, Marika Korabete, Suliasi Vunivalu, Andrew Callaway, and the 19-year-old Max Jorgensen. So, Max getting brought into the squad, who's injured for the back end of the Super Rugby season, missed the whole Rugby Championship, is really interesting. I don't mind the squad, I really don't. The only interesting and kind of thing that's been eating away at me as an All Black supporter, it doesn't bother me who Eddie selects, because I think we can beat them on any day of the week. But what interests me is you had the Rugby Championship, you said this was a pre-season. Now Max Jorgensen may have not been ready, but to put players that are uncapped in the World Cup just to me seems really interesting. It seems like he looked at the Rugby Championship, you had Tom Wright start two games, and then dropped him, and he hasn't seen it since. And it's no argument that you won't have picking Max Jorgensen over Tom Wright. It just seems like, why weren't these guys in the squads earlier? Why weren't they there? Why even start with Quade Cooper if this was your long-term plan? It seems like very reactive to what he's seen in the Rugby Championship, that players just aren't up to it and gone, you know what, let's lay our cards on the table. We're going to select teams, give them experience, and then go plan for 4 years down the track. But Eddie Jones has always spoken that he's going to the World Cup to win it. To me, only selecting Carter Gordon as the one fly half, and you've selected Donaldson as a utility, as he has throughout the whole Rugby Championship, just baffles me. It goes, why wouldn't we see more of Donaldson and just, not select Quade at all? It just seems a lot to be going on in Australian rugby that's in Eddie's head, and I just don't think it's been communicated or seen very well about what he's thinking. And that's why we're all being left looking like a bit shocked, like, what have we just seen selected? So this is part one done of my reviews of the Rugby World Cup squad. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'll look into the Pacific Island teams that have been named, Samoa and Fiji. I think Tonga is coming very soon. I'll also be doing all the squads breakdown, and then finally a prediction on the channel. So make sure you are subscribed and have the notifications ticked for that. But for now, thank you for joining me. I have been Luke from the Sports Booth. We'll see you next time.